Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode on my podcast. Today, I am so thrilled to have your supportive South Asian sis, also known as Hira Rashid, on here. So, Hira is a social worker located in Vancouver, and she happens to hold a lot of knowledge about toxic cultural norms within the South Asian community and how we can heal from them. So, I understand that some cultural norms can lead to self sabotaging behavior, trauma, or guilt. And I think it's very important to address this and learn how we can heal from it. So, I'm very glad that I have Hira with me to touch upon this. But before we do jump into this topic, I want you guys to go check her out on social media. So, Hira, how can we find you on all your platforms?
So on TikTok, I'm supportive South Asian sis, and then Instagram is my other platform, and that is my first and last name blended together. So it's HIRASHID, and yeah, so those are the two platforms I usually utilize um, for with the public. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And for those of you listening, please make sure you guys go check her out on TikTok, especially because she has great content and she also does interact with her followers. So if you did have any questions, she will give some wonderful advice. But with that being said, Hira, tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to get into social work.
Yeah, of course. First off, thank you for having me here, and thank you for having this platform to talk about these topics. It's so important, especially with our generation where we're stuck between where our parents came from and trying to move forward with the new world that we're living in. So, thank you so much for having me. Um, I was born in Pakistan, and my parents immigrated here to Canada when I was 2 years old. Now, I do respect the Indigenous territory that we're on. So I'd like to call myself an unwilling settler because obviously my parents nor myself knew the colonial effects of living here. So that was back in like 1995. So yeah, I grew up in Ontario and Alberta, and then my parents settled us up in northern British Columbia. And that is where I kind of came across what social work was. I was kind of feeling lost at the time. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I liked helping people, and I kind of took after my parents because my parents have always been community builders. They've always been people who are out in the community, helping people, fundraising, just like doing that sort of really good work. And I knew that was something I was interested in. So I actually went and saw a counselor at the college I was attending. And I was like, I'm lost. Like, I don't know what I want to do. And so she was like, well, what about social work? Because it sounds like you like volunteering and stuff and you like working with people. And immediately I was like, oh, hell no. Like social workers steal babies. Like, I don't want to do that. Right. So she was like, well, like, give it a chance. Like, that's not really what it is, but why don't you try it out? So I sat in one of the classes and I completely fell in love. I remember one of my favorite classes was called communication, and it just made so much sense to me because it talked about the intricacies of human connection and the different ways people communicate and how we can communicate with people who are going through a hard time versus people who are doing a little bit better. We talked a lot about things like codependent enabling. It was just
Mhm.
amazing and just eye opening. So, yeah, I fell in love with it. And I was very lucky because all of my teachers and then later my professors at the university I transferred to were very active in the community. And that's something I really admired. So they were people who had not only decades of experience, but they were also people who were either starting up programs in the community, they were going to rallies and protests. I remember the chair of my program and I became very close because we both loved, organizing rallies and, you know, doing protests and stuff when things were um, not going very well for certain communities, especially vulnerable communities like the Indigenous community, and then the Muslim community as well up north. So yeah, that's just where it was, and I just took it from there and kind of made it my own thing. And here I am now. I'm a social worker for the ministry, and I work on a permanency team for Indigenous children.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And because you do work in this field, I'm sure you come across many clients. And I know that you mentioned, you work with mainly minorities. Is that right?
Absolutely. So I have two parts to my career. One is my actual paid job, where I work with children who are partly Indigenous or fully Indigenous, who we're trying to find permanency plans for, which means finding, hopefully placements within their families if possible, if not family, then someone who is open to, preserving their cultural identity. And then the second part of what I call my career is my volunteer work and my community work, where I work with people who are vulnerable. So I work with minority communities, people with addictions, domestic violence victims. Honestly, like you name it, I've probably done some sort of work in any kind of group. So that's what I do.
Okay, so because we are on the topic of, the South Asian community and
Yeah.
all of that, so when you were working with many clients that were South Asian, what
Mhm.
were some of the most common toxic norms that you've noticed among us?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. There's quite
Yeah.
a few. And not to say like other communities don't have this, there are definitely patterns. But I think within the South Asian community there are quite a few that we can definitely point out. One of the biggest ones would be communication between parents and the current generation of children,
Hmm.
and also the connection that is there. As we all know, many of us do lead double lives, right? Because there is a sense of distrust, or if not distrust, a sense of fear that we have, because our parents, if you're first generation or second generation, grew up back home in a community that was completely different than here. And that transition is really, really hard. And I can give an example of my own family. When my parents came here, my mom worked three jobs, right? Like she was thrown into a community where she had to learn the norms here and she was trying to preserve the old culture there. And essentially, what that does to our parents is throw them into survival mode, and when you're in survival mode, it's very hard to parent effectively.
Hmm.
Not saying that my parents or anyone else's parents aren't good parents. They did the best that they could, and there's so much gratitude that goes towards them. But there are missing pieces that come up, and a lot of that is communication. A lot of that is raising children in a culture of shame, and other things like that that make connection with parents a little bit difficult.
So, with a lot of these issues, I'm sure that it can lead down a road of like depression, anxiety,
Mhm,
low self esteem, and so much more. And this is something that actually did happen to me. So,
mhm.
with that, what were some of the most common behavioral patterns or mental health issues stemming from a lot of these problems that you've personally noticed?
Depression is definitely a big one,
Yeah,
and low self-esteem is definitely a big one too.
definitely.
And the thing is, like, people who don't understand the framework of mental health may see this as, oh, everyone claims to have depression or everyone claims to have all of these things going on. But the reality is that, people have suffered from depression, anxiety, low self-esteem for generations.
Hmm.
It's just we're in a place now where we can recognize it and we can work on it to try and break that cycle of abuse. Now, if you're a person who grew up back home, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, wherever it may be, if you're depressed or have low self-esteem or whatever, it's a little different there than it is here, because at least there you have people who look like you, who talk like you, speak the same language, culture. Like there's a lot more support. Maybe you're living within a, multi-family household. It's a little bit more different. Not saying that it's better, but the experiences here might be a little bit more isolating depending on where your family is and depending on if you're connected to people from your own culture or not.
Hmm.
I know that growing up in Ontario, I was the oldest of a lot of our family friends' children. So there was never really anyone my age that was consistently around that I could talk to. And I always felt alone. And it wasn't until we moved to Alberta where I found people my age from the same culture who were having the same experiences, that I was able to kind of recognize what I was going through and then start to find help for myself. So, with our generation, we definitely are at a turning point where we can recognize the things we are going through and how our parents parenting, or how our possible trauma from childhood or experiences from childhood have harmed us, and we can turn that and break that cycle for our future kids.
Hmm. And speaking of one of the toxic generational curses that have been passed around, there's many, but there's one that I actually did want to touch on specifically because
For
this is
sure.
something that is very common among the Desi community, especially. And it's actually about parental pressure and emotional blackmail. So,
Uh,
why is parental pressure and emotional blackmail so prevalent among most Desi parents? And how do you think that this behavior can affect us mentally?
so that again has a lot of backing to it. So
Yeah.
when we have this um, pattern where we have parents who leave their entire support system, their entire communities, to come to the West for a better life. They work hard, and they really want the best for their children, but they seem to create these expectations that can be a little bit out of reach or can be something children don't want. And then, in order to feel some sense of control, or in order to try and push or coerce children into what they think is best for them, the part of emotional blackmail comes up where they can say things like, well, we sacrificed so much for you, and now you owe it to us to either, marry this person or give us this money or
Hmm.
take this specific career path, whatever it may be. And at the end of the day, in their heads, they may be thinking that they're doing what they think is best. But unfortunately, you can only do what's best for yourself,
Hmm.
and you can only control yourself. And I know that's a really hard concept for parents, especially in the Desi community, to understand. And if any parents listen to this, like, I just want to put it out there, you cannot control your children. You can't even control your spouse. You can't control anyone. The only person you can control is yourself. And you shouldn't try to control anyone,
Hmm.
because that's going to harm that relationship. And that toxicity is perpetuated because we see a lot of parents doing this, and then we see children going through with it and they're miserable at the end of the day. I've
Hmm.
seen multiple times where I've had family friends whose children have taken a career path they completely are not interested in, or they marry someone they're not interested in and they're not happy, and then if they stick with it, that cultural toxicity continues, because then they try and put their hopes and dreams onto their children, and the same thing happens.
Exactly. Like, I feel like a lot of the time when, parents try to control their kids into going down a certain path that is for them, it is self motivated parenting, in my opinion. And like, I do
Absolutely.
believe that honor and shame can also play a huge role in this as well, like you mentioned.
Mhm, mhm.
Like, for example, like you said, when someone wants to marry outside of the race or pursue the arts or anything that goes against like cultural values, there's this very common saying that we have heard as kids growing up, and it's, what are other people going to say about this?
Oh,
And
good God.
and honestly, like, I've heard this so much growing up, like especially from my father, and this has
Mhm.
actually caused me to develop like social anxiety. I
Oh,
have a
no.
really big struggle with taking rejection, and
Right.
as I got older, I realized like this actually impacted me a lot. So I wanted to know more about why this obsession with others' opinions is so common. Like, and
Mhm.
I'm sure it contributes to social anxiety, but are there any other things besides depression or social anxiety that it can potentially do?
Oh, absolutely. So when we have this sort of behavior where we're seeking validation of others, it comes, and this is something that is my own opinion, is it stems from the idea of communities staying together and having, norms and values. And if anyone strays outside of it, they become isolated. And so our parents may, in some cases, be saying things like, what will people say, in order to protect us, to keep us within those norms and values so that we don't become isolated.
Hmm.
Because that's something that would happen back home. And yeah, other than depression and anxiety, it can really cause things like attachment issues, right? So the way that you trust people, the way you communicate with people, the low self-esteem is a really, really big one. And
Hmm.
then it can really, really bar you from achieving things that you want to do, because you're constantly hypersensitive to the fact that people are watching you and what are they going to think about you. And that's very detrimental to your mental health.
Hmm.
And down the road, you're going to have a hard time communicating with your partner, right? If you have one, you're going to have a hard time communicating with your children, right? And again, this whole idea of other people are watching you and what will they think, it just breaks down a lot of, a lot of confidence and a lot of things that are very important for people to build up in order to be a strong and independent person. And my response to my parents has always been, people don't pay my bills, and even if they did, what I do is none of their business.
Yeah.
Because I chose a path that was not, doctor, lawyer, engineer, whatever is expected. I was expected to become a doctor, and that was something my family expected of me. And I tried it, right? I wrote the MCAT, I did the whole thing, and I hated it. I hated it. I love science, don't get me wrong, but it was not something that I wanted to be doing. And so to this day, like, my dad, and this is me like just opening up and being a little vulnerable, my dad never came around to the idea of me being a social worker until he saw me become successful in my own career.
Mm-hmm.
And, my mom's always been there since day one, cheering me on and supporting me, but my dad was pissed. He was not happy, and he kept pushing me to go into law. And it wasn't until, not tooting my own horn, that I was getting awards for community work or being appointed to councils within the government, that he was happy with where I was. And
Mm-hmm.
and I get where he was coming from. He was scared that I wasn't going to be successful, wasn't going to be independent, maybe not make enough money, but money isn't everything, right? Success is measured by what you think is successful, not by.
Definitely. Yeah. I can fully relate to a lot of those things because, like everything you mentioned that happens when you do have this, pressure of caring about external validation, it's right on because actually I'm somebody who's very artistic and I like my
Mhm.
parents, specifically my father. I think my mom was more open with it, but my dad, he wanted me to be like this cookie cutter doctor, lawyer, engineer. And
Right.
when I was a child, I was always into the arts. Like that's something that I loved and I still do. And I remember like he would completely try to shut out this part of me. So I struggled a lot with my confidence as I got older. And then it took a lot in me to finally be like, you know what, I'm going to pursue what I want to pursue because at the end of the day, like you said,
Mm.
other people don't pay my bills. So
Right.
yeah, like a lot of these issues really do happen when we are taught from a young age to focus on external validation. And
Hmm.
like that's exactly why I think it's so important to be aware of these issues so that we can change these toxic cycles and like
Yeah.
create a healthier future for all our children and their children and future generations. So now, like, I want to know how we can actually heal from this because that's the
Hmm.
most important thing after awareness.
Hmm.
So, what are some steps that we can take to overcome, the the pressure of external validation or emotional blackmail?
Right. Well, first off, I'm so sorry that that's the experiencing you're going the experiences you're going through. That's really hard. And kudos to you for sticking to it. It's really hard to have to face that and still be able to go through and still live your life. Um, I hope things do work out, and our people, your family, and whoever else may be causing anxiety is open to your choices, right?
Thank you.
And when we talk about validation, one thing that I want to point out is, as human beings, it's natural for us to seek validation. Where we mistake ourselves or where we go the wrong way is when we seek validation from people who don't matter, right? People
Hmm.
who do not matter to us, who don't have an impact in our lives. We should be seeking validation from, well, A, within ourselves, right? Am I good enough for myself? Am I proud of myself? Do I love myself? And B, from the people who we love around us who do support us, right? So if that may be your family, maybe your friends, whoever it might be, those are the people that matter. We shouldn't be looking for validation from other people. And we live in such a weird world now with technology where we get such instant gratification from stuff, right? We're
Hmm.
swiping on Tinder, you're going on social media, how many likes am I getting? And we're constantly seeking that validation from complete strangers who, A, don't know us and never have known us, B, will never take the time to get to know us, and C, don't care about us actually. So when we want validation, we should be seeking it from those who do love us and know who we are. And that's really important to differentiate. Now, when it comes to the idea of validation from the overall South Asian community and the idea of blackmailing, once you kind of realize that you're going down this toxic path, it's really important to have those conversations with the people around you and find people who will support and understand and come from the same background as you. Now, it's hard to talk to parents about this stuff because, it's not easy, right? Nerve-wracking, especially I know it's nerve-wracking for me whenever I have to bring up stuff with my parents. But it is important to try and find some middle ground. And if things are too toxic and I don't like this path, but sometimes you got to step away. I see a lot of different groups on Facebook where young women who are, let's say, for example, in an interracial relationship, they have to walk away from family because they've found this great person who, fits all the things that they need and the parents may want, but the only difference is the race is not what they would expect.
Hmm.
So putting up boundaries is very important and it's very healthy. And boundaries, it sounds pretty harsh, but boundaries are very important in any relationship. Your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your siblings, your relationship, with your partner, whoever it may be. Because without boundaries, we allow a lot of toxicity to come in and, we don't filter it out. For example, my weight has always been a problem, and it's something my mom has constantly brought up over the past 10 years. And don't get me wrong, I love my mom to death, and she doesn't always say it in a mean way. She jokes about it or she'll mention someone else's weight, but it's something that's very hard for me because of my health. And I've put up a boundary now where I will not speak to her about weight, and I've told her that, right? And it was a very hard conversation because to her, she brings it up because she's scared for me or she's worried about my health, but to me, it's just constantly demoralizing. So now if she brings it up, I just stop talking. And I'm like, nope, we're not talking about this because I have asked you to not speak to me about my weight. And that for me was a huge step. Like to have to speak to my mother about a boundary that's so hard was not easy and it took some time. But she respects it. And I'm lucky that she does because she could just not. And then something harsher would have had to come up out of that. So when it comes to blackmail, when it comes to, this false validation from others, know yourself and know what your values are.
Hmm.
Have people around you who know you, love you, and support you for who you are and have the experiences that you may have or similar ones and put up boundaries where they are needed. We constantly live in this fear that our parents will be mad at us, that we forget that we are grown adults, right?
Hmm.
And you are an adult living in the West. You have the right to live your life the way you choose. And that does not have to mean that you're being disrespectful to your parents or elders. Disrespecting your parents or elders is not something that's encouraged at all. But you should also not take disrespect from them either. Respect is something that's earned. And I know in our culture, we always say respect your elders, but I disagree with that because you have to earn respect, no matter if you're an elder, you're a youngster, whatever it might be.
Definitely. And along with like setting the boundaries, that can definitely be a good start to, the healing process. Also, just understanding that maybe sympathizing with our parents as well, being able to understand that, like you mentioned, they're just here to survive and provide for us. And so they were passing down things that they were taught, and they never really had the opportunity to heal and discover. And we do now. So, we might as well take advantage of that. And once we do realize that and we forgive them, I think that's when the true healing does begin. Um, and I'm really glad that people are realizing, these things are affecting our mental health and there's more awareness about this. But I know that mental health generally is so misunderstood and considered shameful or weak within the Desi community. And this
Mm-hmm.
makes it very hard for some people to open up. And some people even go their whole lives without saying a single thing because there's so much shame surrounding it. So how can people cope with the stigmas and shame surrounding that? So, um, I know therapy is a really good step, but some people don't know how to take that first step.
Yeah.
So what's some good advice or tips for that?
So that depends on who you are as a person, right? You do something called self care. I know self care is something that's thrown around left, right, and center. But if you think about your whole day, you have 24 hours. You sleep, you eat, go to school, work, whatever it might be. How many minutes of that day do you take to just be by yourself, take a breath, and do something that you enjoy that's going to reset you? For example, I have high functioning anxiety,
Hmm.
and sometimes in a day, I need to take 10 minutes and just meditate. It doesn't have to be very long. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 2 minutes. It's just, I'll sit there, I'll do a breathing exercise, I'll ground myself, and I'm reset and I'm good to go. And self-care is something that takes time, right? It's something that takes time and constant work. And it can be anything. I used to teach a workshop for the Crisis Center of Northern BC to high school students, and I would throw around this ball with all the letters of the alphabet on it. And wherever the ball landed, the kids had to tell me an activity they can do for self care. There's literally an activity for every single letter of the alphabet. You know, if you get A, you can, do an activity outside. You can, if one kid said you could do acrobatics or something, right? Kids got pretty creative. With B, you could play baseball, right? So whatever you enjoy, do that and give yourself some time to do it. The other thing is the consistency, right? We always talk about physical health, losing weight, gaining muscle, whatever it is. Mental health is the exact same way, right? You're not going to eat a piece of broccoli and lose 20 pounds after eating unhealthy for 10 years. Mental health is the same way. You're not going to do one set of meditation and fix all of your mental health problems, right? It's going to take a lot of work. And I like to compare mental health to physical health, right? If you're having a bad day, and you're allowed to, right? One misconception is people think sometimes that you have to consistently be happy in order to be a functioning human being. That's psychotic. Like, if people were always happy, that would be really weird. We're human beings. You're allowed to be not okay. So I like to say it's okay to not be okay. But if you're not okay for more than 2 or 3 days, you need to sit back and figure out what's going on and get help if you have the resources. So with mental health, if you saw someone who broke their leg, you would tell them to go to a doctor or whatever it might be. The same thing for mental health. If you see someone who's struggling, for some reason, we tend to tell them to suck it up, right?
Hmm.
What we should be doing is trying to encourage them to find help, and encourage them to sit back and figure out what's going on and get to the bottom of it. Um, and the beautiful thing about living in a community as diverse as we do now, we can learn different ways to do self-care, different ways to help our mental health, and then we can go back and help our parents, because remember, their mental health matters too, and they've been in survival mode for so long that maybe if they had childhood trauma or traumas from leaving their support groups and their parents and whatever to move here, trauma from experiencing racism while they were trying to raise kids, that's still there.
Hmm.
So one thing, as an example, we've done with my mom, all four of us siblings are now, or older. The youngest of us is 19. He's going to turn 20 this year. And my mom's kind of like, at the age where her kids are growing up and starting to move out. We're really encouraging our mom to seek out therapy and do self-care. My sister does a great job with her. She buys her painting supplies. My mom's very artistic. She loves painting. She's, I think, trying to teach my mom how to knit and stuff, right?
Hmm.
And we're now looking for a South Asian counselor who's a little bit older, that can do counseling with her. And that's going to take some time to convince her, because she's not quite convinced that counseling and therapy works. It doesn't work for everyone, but we would like her to try. Um, and I'm sure a lot of parents would be open to it. Now, my dad's the complete opposite. He does not agree or see it in the same way. We've tried to bring it up multiple times with him, and he's just not the kind of person who would, sit down in a therapy session,
Hmm.
or even recognize that he has, mental health stuff going on. And that's just how he is, and that's hard for it. But the thing is, like, we have to set pretty hard boundaries with him. But, I hope one day he is able to open up to the idea that he may have some mental health stuff that he needs to focus on, because we know his past, and his past is quite traumatic. Same with my
Yep.
mom. So yeah, we, like you said, like, we're in a place after forgiving, we can start healing, and sometimes healing is teaching our parents something they were never taught, which is how to take care of your mental health.
It's interesting because my situation is actually very similar to yours.
Oh,
It's amazing that you're taking that step because my mom, she loves crafting. Like I always see her like cutting things out, and I wanted to get her into like, some type of therapy that revolves around like art therapy. Yeah, art
yeah.
therapy. Same thing with my dad. Like he's very closed off to actually going to therapy. Like he doesn't believe in that, that stuff works or whatnot. Um, yeah, like I'm so glad that you guys are taking that first step. And I definitely do think it's so important to practice self care because sometimes we do forget that a lot of the time, especially our parents. They never really, practice self care because they were constantly trying to provide for us. And
Yeah.
exactly. So, Like, I'm thank you so much for that wonderful advice. Like, I truly am gonna apply that to my own life, and, I really
Yeah.
hope that everyone who's hearing this applies it as well. Um, but I know that, like, overall, we talked a lot about the negative side of the Desi community, but I know it's not, like, all bad, right? Because
No,
there are
no.
definitely yeah, there's, like, definitely some, like, positive, sides of the Desi community as well. So I'd love to hear some things that you love about our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Right before I get into that, I just want to say that, counseling and therapy is great, but it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
There are multitudes of different resources that you can utilize to do self-care and get some help. There's so many different ways in therapy. There's CBT, there's behavioral, there's so much. And then there's things like you said, art therapy, animal therapy. There's so many different ways that people can reach out and find what works for them. So it's not just sitting with someone and talking. It can be, anything really. Whatever works for you works for you. But one of the things I will say about our South Asian community is how close knit and protective we are of each other. And I'll give an example. The community in northern BC where my parents live, I have never experienced such a positive Desi community before living there. Um, Everyone there, it's a small community. I don't think there's more than maybe 25 families or 30 families that are South Asian or Muslim. Um, but they're the kind of people who will be there for your joy and for your sorrow and be there to support you no matter what. So, a couple of examples. My parents went to Pakistan for quite some time when I was still living back up north, and I had run out of a medication. And at the time, I was working two jobs, going to school full time, paying the bills, and I didn't have time to go to the doctor for a renewal. And one of the doctors, who was Pakistani, he was like, "Listen, I will just come drop off the prescription," because he had seen my file. He knew it was something a medication I was taking constantly for a number of years, and he just came by, dropped it off, and he was like, "Yeah, just let me know if you need another renewal, whatever it is." And it was great. Aunties constantly dropping off food when our parents are around, right? Even when we ask them, "It's too much, auntie, like we can't eat all this food." Honestly, I think in those like 6 months, I probably fed all of my neighbors with the amount of food these aunties would drop off every day. So grateful for that. um when my brother got into medical school, there was so much joy. I think we had about 13 to 15 different sized cakes at our house that families had just brought over to congratulate him. We had to throw a cake eating party, so all four of us siblings invited all of our friends to eat all this cake that was sitting in our house. And when my dadabu, my paternal grandfather, passed away, my mom didn't have to worry about anything. The community really stepped up to support us through that really hard time. So
Mhm.
I think that our South Asian community is so beautiful and intricate when it comes to supporting and protecting each other, when need be, um, and just being encouraging and engaging in each other's lives. And it can be a beautiful thing. It can definitely be a toxic thing sometimes with the gossip and stuff, but I think more so it's when you have a connection with people and love for them, that comes out in their actions. And I think a big part of that is food, is comfort, is company, and just knowing, right? Just knowing that we all are connected in some way.
100%. Like, I actually had a memory that popped up as you were talking about,
Hmm.
your experiences. And also thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I know that, getting personal is difficult, and I'm so glad that you are. But, like, when my grandmother did come to visit Canada, it was so nice to see because my grandmother was like so respected and nurtured and taken care of,
Hmm.
especially, when she was passing away. The family really came together. Like, she was so taken care of. And I love that. And it's also nice because, like, our weddings are so lit. We have amazing food. Uh,
Oh God, yeah.
very family oriented. So there's a lot of great things about our culture, and there's like a lot of positives to it too. So I think it's good to recognize, both sides, whether it's positive or negative. And I think it's awesome that you're bringing attention onto both. And I'm sure that you were able to change so many people's lives and perspectives by doing what you do. And thank you so much. And this actually brings me to my last question for you. And yeah, I'm kind of sad that this is the last question because I had such an amazing conversation.
Oh,
But
this is great.
I wanted to know, how being a social worker and helping other people has changed your own life.
Oh wow. That's a that's a good question. I think for me, um, I've always been what I call a helper. Um, I've always liked to help people, and something that I realized a couple years ago was that actually, by working with so many people and helping them, I was actually helping myself because I was learning so much from the communities I was working with and from the people I was working with, just from their experiences and what they were going through. Honestly, when I know it's cliche, it's like, you think you're helping someone, but they're actually helping you. That's a very, very true statement for me. Um, and I'll give an example of that where a few years ago I was not in a really good place mental health wise, and I used to volunteer at the local soup kitchen. And there was this lady who would come to the soup kitchen, and she was just like the sweetest person ever. And she would come and take her meal, and I would sometimes sit down with her, and just being with her and having that presence, she was kind of more grandmotherly. Um, I learned a lot of life lessons from her, just from her telling me her stories and telling me, what it was like as a person who lived alone in the community, what it was like growing up as an Indigenous woman. Um, and it was amazing because it really helped me kind of reflect on where a lot of my own personal issues were coming from. And she just gave me so much hope because she had a really hard life. And I looked at her and I was like, holy, like, she is probably the most resilient person I've met. And I was in such awe of who she was and her energy and her kindness towards others, that it just really put some perspective, set some perspective up for me, and then really helped me through a really difficult time. She doesn't know that. Obviously, I, didn't have a chance to thank her. She passed away a few years later when I moved to Vancouver. But, I always think about her and I really pray, that she's in a better place. Um, but yeah, like working with people, uh, is just a beautiful thing. You make so many connections and you learn so much subconsciously that you don't realize it until a few years later. And that's been my experience. And I absolutely love it. I think even though sometimes I do like space to myself, I love being with people and around people. And it just energizes me to see kindness and compassion and human connection. So I don't know, social work, it's cliche to say, but I feel like it's my calling. And social work is an umbrella term for a lot of different kinds of work. So, it's not just working for an agency or whatever. It's working with people and being social, right? That's the biggest piece of it. So yeah.
That's so sweet. And that is so amazing. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing that with us and for passing your knowledge down. I'm certain that anyone who's struggling with the things that we've spoken about will be able to take something from this for sure. And hopefully it will lead them down a road of self awareness and healing. Overall, I honestly really appreciate you for literally being that supportive South Asian sis and for being on my podcast today. Um,
Thank you so much.
no problem. And I really hope that your TikTok continues to grow and evolve because I truly do think it just like deserves so much recognition. And for those of you who are not following Hira, go and follow her right now. Show her some love because she's very smart. She knows her shit. She gives great advice. I will include all her platforms in the description so you guys can go follow her. While you're at that, also follow me on Instagram. My username is at It's Munha. And follow me on Spotify to keep up with more of my episodes. And I really want to thank everyone for listening to today's podcast. And most importantly, I want to thank Hira again for being such a great guest and for educating us today. But that's it for today, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you that tuned into today's episode. You will be hearing from me in my next one. Goodbye, everyone.